to continue in our series looking at Deuteronomy. So if you have a Bible this morning, we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 34 to 46. There's more on the side there if you need them. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 34 to 36. It's page 179 if you're in the Blue Beacon Bible. And we'll start just by reading the passage. Deuteronomy chapter 1, beginning in sentence 34. It says, "When the Lord heard what you said, he was angry and solemnly swore, 'No one from this evil generation shall see the good land I swore to give your ancestors, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He will see it, and I will give him and his descendants the land he set his feet on, because he followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Because of you, the Lord became angry with me also, and said, You shall not enter it either, but your assistant, Joshua, son of Nun, will enter it. Encourage him, because he will lead Israel to inherit it. And the little ones that you said would be taken captive, your children who do not yet know good from bad, they will enter the land. I will give it to them, and they will take possession of it. But as for you, turn round and set out towards the desert along the route to the Red Sea.' Then you replied, 'We have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight, as the Lord our God commanded us.' So every one of you put on his weapons, thinking it easy to go up into the hill country. But the Lord said to me, 'Tell them, do not go up and fight, because I will not be with you. You will be defeated by your enemies.' So I told you, but you would not listen. You rebelled against the Lord's command, and in your arrogance you marched up into the hill country. The Amorites who lived in those hills came out against you. They chased you like a swarm of bees and beat you down from Seir all the way to Hormah. You came back and wept before the Lord, but he paid no attention to your weeping and turned a deaf ear to you. And so you stayed in Kadesh many days, all the time you spent there." So we're finishing up the end of the first chapter of Deuteronomy. And in today's passage, what we're going to see and look for to help guide us through this end of this bit of the first chapter is three responses, three reactions to the circumstances that the Israelites found themselves in. And the three words we're going to look for is angry, arrogant, and amenable, because I needed an A. Angry, arrogant, and amenable. These are the three reactions that we see coming from this. So the first one is that God was angry. We saw that in verse 34. If you look back, it says that when the Lord heard what you said, he was angry. And it says not only was he angry at the nation of Israel, but he was also angry at Moses. Now, just to remind us, what's happening here is the nation of Israel has gathered again. Remember, they're outside the promised land. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, they're outside the promised land. The place that God had promised to give them, they'd come here before, they're waiting on the outside, and God is reminding them of the mistakes of essentially, we see, it's the children, right? It's the children who weren't a part of making the bad decision. So it's their parents or their grandparents. And they're saying, don't make the mistake of the generation who was before you. Remember what happened the last time you were here. And the last time you were here, God was angry. Now, he was angry because of their disobedience. Now, I have to admit, I don't know that we often come to church and hear many sermons about God being angry. I think pastors often shy away from it as Christians. I don't think it's the thing we lead with when we're talking to someone about our faith. Yeah, God sometimes gets angry. It's not a thing that it feels very comfortable. And yet, actually, in this circumstance, it makes a lot of sense. We do the same thing. So when I want to say I was a teenager, but I'm pretty sure I was at university. I think I was in my early 20s. And I was home visiting I don't know if I was home in the summertime or if it was just like spring break or something. But I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was coming to visit and meet my parents. And so I was going to meet him. I don't actually remember all the details. I just remember being very excited to go meet my boyfriend, and I jumped in the car, and without thinking, it was just, I've got to get there. I can't, you know that. Oh, it's so exciting. So I'm driving in the car, and I get on the motorway, and I'm maybe, I don't know, 2 miles, 3 miles from home. And I have a feeling that I had never had before because had only been driving for a few years at that point. But my car, like the gas pedal just didn't seem to do much. Like the car just didn't seem to have much go in it. And I thought, something's wrong with the car. And then I looked over and the petrol tank was on E, and the car was just slowing, and I'm starting to panic now and thinking, I'm literally on the motorway. So I get over, in America, I can't remember which side of the road I'm on. Anyway, I get over to the side. I literally can't picture it. Anyway, I think I was getting over to the left. Anyway, I'm getting over. I'm like, I've got to get off the highway because my car's not going forward. And so I pull off, and I don't know what I was thinking. So I don't think I had a cell phone then. Like, this is how old I am. There were no mobile phones to call mom. Like, I've, been too excited to see my boyfriend and didn't bother to check if I'd put petrol in the car. And so I pull over to the side of the road, and I'm not actually that far from the exit that I took from my own house. Like, and I think to myself, well, I'll just pull over, and I'll get over as close as I can, and then I'll just have to run back down the exit because what else can I do? So I get out of the car and I'm walking down the opposite way down the motorway on the side there. And then I kind of get this sense of like, this is a scary thing and probably you shouldn't do this. And so, I start running because I'm like, I think this is dangerous and I need to get off the road. So I'm like running. I must have looked like a crazy, I have no idea what people thought. Like, here's this like blonde teenager running down and I'm running and I'm like crying and I get off not too far, I get off the exit and find out, I don't even remember how I got a hold of my parents or what I did. But I just remember when my mom came and, my parents turned up and they're, are you okay? My mom's very upset with me. And some of you already know it's coming. She's very upset. And once she sees that I'm totally whole, I'm perfectly fine, nothing terrible happened, my car is parked on the side, Dad's got the little tank, the little jug, we're gonna go take it, fill it up, all's fine. You know it's coming, don't you? My mom was furious with me. She was absolutely, and what were you thinking? What were you thinking? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I was thinking there was a boy that I was excited to see. That's what I was thinking. And she's like, well, you're not there faster now, are you? It didn't help you, did you? You weren't, and she's angry. Now, why was she? Nobody in here is like, oh man, your mom is so mean. You're thinking, too right, she was angry. You're being foolish, Chrissy. You made a bad choice. My mom wasn't angry because I did a wrong thing. She was angry because she thought, Chrissy, you could have been killed. You could have gotten hurt. Like, you are daft. No boy isn't that important. What were you thinking? She was worried about my safety, and it was out of her worry and her concern and her love for me that she was angry at my choice, that I hadn't been wise to look at the petrol tank, take the time, do what I needed to do. I will reach the promised land. I will get there, but I need to do it in the right way. Otherwise, I put myself in danger. We understand that kind of anger. It makes sense. We feel that kind of anger. Those of you who are parents and grandparents who think, yeah, I've had those moments, I had to pick which story. I've had a few of those moments where I'm like, what are you thinking? Right? That's the kind of moment that's happening here. When it says that God was angry, he was angry that they were disobedient, but he was angry because he knew that they were putting themselves in jeopardy. They thought they were going to take the easy way, but instead he knew you're going to miss what was promised. You're going to miss the good thing I have for you because you think you know better, and you don't. Like a good father, he says, it makes me angry when you put yourself in danger. Remember, for us, the promised land all throughout Deuteronomy is a picture of the promise that we receive in Jesus. It's the picture of eternal life that we have, the picture of an abundant life that we receive because Jesus died on the cross. And so when God gets angry with people, he's angry because their disobedience might make them miss the thing for which Jesus gave his life. So it says that God was angry. Now we should be relieved in one sense that God gets angry, we should be relieved. We should be relieved because it's a sign that he loves us. There's a relief in God's anger because it is a reminder that God is just, and that even though in this life sometimes it looks like bad people get away with things, they do not, in God's economy, get away with it. Those of us who have seen or experienced injustice, we can know the relief of saying God gets angry at sin and he will not let it go unpunished. There are consequences. And it's also perhaps a warning for us that our sin, our disobedience does have consequences. That's why God gets angry. He doesn't want us to bear the consequences. He wants us to be obedient. So it's important for us to look at and to acknowledge, not to shy away from or hide from God's anger, but recognize God's anger is a sign that he loves us. It is a warning to protect us, and it gives us relief that there is justice. So the first reaction is that God was angry. The second reaction that we see in this passage is that Israel was arrogant. If you look at verses 41 to 43, the nation of Israel, they're a fickle group of people, aren't they? So they disobeyed God. They said it was too scary to go in. They'd sent in the spies. We talked about that last time, didn't we? And they didn't respond to the spies. They said, it's too scary. We can't do it. It doesn't matter what God has said. We're not going to go. And then God was angry. And so then what did they do? We're in trouble now. I don't know if my parents would love me for telling these stories sometimes, but when I was a kid, occasionally we would go, they'd say, Mom, can we go get ice cream, or can we go we didn't eat out lots, as kids, we didn't, so, please, can we go? And she'd say, I don't, you have to talk to your father, because they never wanted to disagree, and if we ever got caught asking Mom and she says no, and then we asked Dad, and there was no crime you could commit more than trying to get Mom and Dad to pit against each other. So my Mom and Dad were very good. They never agreed without saying, well, what did your father say, or what did your mother say? They were very good. So Mom would say, we got to ask your dad, which usually meant it's probably not a no, because if it was a no, she would have just said no. And so we're like, there's hope. We might get to go get ice cream. And I can remember so many times, my dad was quite frugal, and ice cream is not an essential in the diet of a child. You don't need to have ice cream to live. And so we would, Dad, please, Mom said we need to ask you, can we please get ice cream? And he would say no. And then just every once in a while, if it was something that my mom did want to do, she never said anything to us. She'd get a bit less than happy. It would become apparent to my dad that my mom was a bit annoyed at his answer. And suddenly my dad's answer would change. And I always used to think, why do you say no to me? But as soon as Mom gets mad, and my dad, like any thinking man, says, I don't want my wife to be angry at me right now. I'm going to change my response and maybe try to salvage this. Now, the really painful bit was my mom would say, no, we're not going now. You don't really want to go. We're not going to go. And me and my brother are sitting there bewildered, like, please, could we just go? We said yes. And my mom's like, no, on the principle, we're not going. It was always this big. But this is what the nation of Israel is doing. We're in trouble. We've made God angry. We don't want to be in trouble. So, we'll go now. We'll do it now. And so they said, we're going to go up and fight. So they get ready for battle. And you'll notice a few things they say. In verse 41, it says they thought it would be easy. I don't know why they thought it would be easy, because it seems like 10 minutes ago they were afraid of how hard it was going to be. But now they think it's going to be easy. And then it says that God says to Moses, tell the people, don't go. Don't go. I'm not going with you. You've already done wrong. I've told you what to do. You weren't obedient. Now you have the consequences. Don't go. And it says that Moses tells them in verse 43, and they respond, and it says they rebelled against the Lord's command, and in their arrogance, they marched up into the hill country. You notice their arrogance. The word arrogant means things like being superior, proud, or entitled. They thought, no, God owes us the promised land. He said he was going to give it to us. It doesn't matter that we weren't obedient to him. He has to give it to us because he said he would. They were entitled. And do you notice something else? They say that, we're going to be obedient now. They were still disobedient because God said, don't go. First God says, go. They say, I'm not going to do it. Then God says, don't go. And they say, we're going anyway. You see what's happened here? Their heart hasn't fundamentally changed. They're going through the motions of, no, God, we're going to be obedient now. But actually, their heart had not actually changed. They were still being disobedient. They were still saying, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to do it our own way. They didn't like God's means of getting to the promised land the first time. They said, that looks hard. We don't want to go that way. And God said, you've been disobedient. And then they said, well, we'll work it out. We can do this. We can do this ourselves. You see, they thought they didn't need God. They thought that they could get to the promised land on their own terms. We experience this in our own lives. I have all sorts of friends down the pub. I have one particular friend, and we don't. She's a good friend of mine. We don't often talk about faith. Everybody knows I'm a pastor, so you slightly can't avoid it. But we don't. I try not to press too much. I don't want her to not want to be my friend. But on occasion, when it's appropriate, and there was a moment a few weeks ago, and she made some comment. We were talking about the pub, and the pub is up for sale, and all these things, and what will we do, and all this, And I said to her, we never talk about what you believe. Oh, taking a risk here. So we never talk about what you believe. Don't you think there's any merit to any of this stuff that I'm going on about all the time? And she says, well, there might be. It's too soon. I'll take care of it when I'm a bit older and I'm closer to dying, is what she said. I know, we laugh at it, but actually it's not that uncommon for people to say, I'm not ready yet, I'm not finished doing the things I want to do, so I'll get round to it when I'm ready. Now, I didn't give her any dire, God doesn't promise us tomorrow, but it's true. God doesn't promise, And I prayed for her that night, please, Jesus, don't make her the punchline to a story, please. Be gracious. And God is gracious, and I love her, and I'll keep looking for opportunities. But actually, I know a lot of non-Christians who will say, well, actually, the path that you've laid out in Scripture, the gospel, is not comfortable for me. I don't want to submit and surrender and sacrifice my whole life to follow someone who's going to prevent me from doing whatever I want to do with my life. So if it's true, I'll wait a little longer so I can enjoy my freedom for as long as I can. It's disobedience, isn't it? There are consequences. God doesn't want us. God says there's arrogance in that. You don't like that word, but it's in the Bible, right? It's right there. These uncomfortable things. Sometimes God is angry. Sometimes people are arrogant. That we think we know better. And we do the same as Christians. Maybe not quite in the same way as our non-Christian friends, but we express our own arrogance at times. That we believe that God has promised something to us, and we think, I don't want to do it the way. Why this way? Why did I have to go through this experience in order to get to? I don't want to go this way. And we think, I can do this on my own. I'll achieve this myself. I'm doing a good thing, God. I'm serving you. And God says, I never told you to do that. You see, the question is, are we being arrogant? Do we think that we can do it without God? Or actually are we being obedient? Because the Israelites mistook arrogance for obedience. They mistook arrogance for obedience. Arrogance is saying, I'm entitled, I deserve this, and I can do it myself. Obedience is about submission. We'll see that in the last one. The last reaction, the last response. We had anger, we had arrogance, and the last one is not actually written in the passage, but I was going for a name. Caleb was amenable, is what I said. Caleb was amenable. It's a good word anyway. Verse 36, did you notice that? We skipped past it. Caleb was amenable. God was angry with the people except for Caleb. And it says, except for Caleb, he will see it, and I will give him and his descendants the land he set his feet on, in verse 36, because he followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Amenable is what I said. He followed the Lord wholeheartedly. In other words, Caleb was amenable to doing things God's way. He was wholeheartedly committed to following the way that God said to do things. He was amenable. The word amenable means ready or willing to act, answer, or yield. to be open to influence and advice. It is the opposite of arrogance. A wholehearted submission to God. Obedience requires submission, a willingness to yield, a willingness and openness to allow God to give us advice, if you will, is what this says. Influence, right? An openness, a willingness, a submittedness. It is the opposite of arrogance. So while the nation of Israel said, no, we're going to be obedient now, they weren't actually submitted to God's way. And yet Caleb, and we'll see Joshua as well, they were wholeheartedly submitted to allowing God to be the ruler. God was the decision maker. And so they moved forward and they received what God had promised. The thing I think that we should take away from this, and we'll wrap it up because we're going to have some worship, we're going to have communion. What I didn't preach, and what I think is important to be reminded of, because this story is told as a reminder to a new generation. And what it tells us about God, despite the fact that he sometimes gets angry, despite the fact that we are sometimes arrogant, despite the fact that we are not as wholehearted as we should be, God still keeps his promise. Mm-hmm. He is faithful even when we are faithless. God still keeps his promise. And he doesn't want us wandering in the desert for 40 years, missing out on the good things he has for us. So sometimes he gets angry in an effort to bring us back on course, in an effort to remind us your decisions have consequences. So we need to be submitted, not arrogant in our obedience, but actually submitted and yielded to Jesus as King. And unlike the nation of Israel, it seems it's a harsh punishment. Those people who rebelled, they wandered and they never got another chance. For that generation of people, we do get a second chance because of a cross. God knows we're arrogant. God knows we're disobedient. God knows that we sometimes go our own way, and yet he gives us a second chance because of Jesus. And so he tells us these stories. He reminds us, don't make the same mistakes that this generation made, or the one after, or the one after, or the one after. Choose to submit your hearts to Jesus. Choose wholehearted obedience. And when we do, what Jesus offers to us is the promised land, the promise of eternal life, but also the promise of an abundant life now. Don't get caught up in seeking to fulfill the abundant life in your own way, by your own purposes. We do that. God's promised me a good life, so I'm just pursuing the good life. I'm just going after it the way that I want. God promises us an abundant life, but it comes through submission and obedience to Jesus. So let's learn from those who've come before us. Let's not spend 40 years wasting our lives wandering in circles when God has a purpose for us and he wants to give us a life that is abundant and full when we're submitted to him.